Today, we need to talk about something coming out of Minnesota that should make every single taxpayer in this country sit up straight. So, picture this with me. A man spends his career as a Minnesota state trooper. Years on icy highways, working crash scenes at 2 in the morning, putting criminals in handcuffs. That is the only life he knows, catching bad guys. Then in 2014, he hangs up the badge and takes a new job. The state asks him to build and lead a special unit inside the Department of Human Services. The mission is simple: find the people stealing from a program meant to pay for childcare for poor families. So that is exactly what he does. He recruits a team of former cops and they go to work. And what they find stops them cold. Daycare centers billing the state for 100 children a day when no kids ever walk through the door. Centers billing Monday through Monday, holidays and weekends included, cash kickbacks, money wired overseas. He would later say his team had a front row seat to watch the fraud happen, with regular contact with the very people doing it. And then one day in 2018, a senior official walks into his office, red in the face, almost yelling, and tells him to delete it. Delete the paragraphs documenting the fraud out of an official report. His name is Jay Swanson, and what they did to him next is the part Minnesota spent years trying to keep buried, because there is a number hidden inside this story. And the most damning thing about it is that it did not come from a whistleblower, and it did not come from a Republican. It came from a firm the state itself hired to prove the whistleblowers wrong. If your tax dollars fund anything at all, this is exactly how it vanishes. So here is what happened in that office. Swanson did not delete the paragraphs. He stood in that office and told the official, to his face, that he believed what they were asking him to do was illegal. Think about who is saying that. This is not an activist. This is not a political operative. This is a man who spent his career enforcing the law in Minnesota, now being told by his own bosses to erase evidence of a crime. And he refused. But here is the part that should genuinely unsettle you, because it reveals what was actually happening behind the walls of that agency. According to Swanson, somewhere around the middle of 2017, the entire mission quietly flipped. He put it in plain words that nobody at the top wanted repeated. By mid-2017, he said, the leadership at DHS had no focus on stopping the fraud. The focus was on stopping the people who were investigating the fraud. Read that again. The investigators became the target, not the criminals draining a program built for poor kids, the cops trying to catch them. So now you have to ask the obvious question. Why? Why would an agency full of public servants work harder to shut down its own fraud unit than to shut down the fraud? Hold on to that question, because the answer is the whole story. Swanson's team was not guessing. They had, in his words, a front row seat. They had regular contact with the people committing the fraud. They watched it happen in real time, documented it, built cases, and brought those cases forward. And one by one, they hit a wall. Not a wall of evidence, a wall of management. The deeper they dug, the harder leadership pushed back, until a senior official was standing in an office demanding that the findings be scrubbed from the record. This was not incompetence. Incompetence is an accident. This was a decision. Somebody decided the safest thing for the department was for the public to never see what these investigators were seeing. And that instinct to protect the institution instead of the taxpayer, points straight at a number that the state would spend real money trying to hide. But silencing one veteran cop was actually the small part. Because while leadership was busy aiming at the investigators, they were aiming away from something much bigger. They were aiming away from just how much money was actually walking out the door. So let us talk about the money, because the size of this is hard to even hold in your head. For years, the official line was that this was small. Prosecutors had only ever proven somewhere between $5 and $6 million in childcare fraud. 5 to 6 million. That was the number the public was allowed to have. But the investigators on the ground, the people with the front row seat, were looking at something on a completely different scale. They believed the fraud could exceed $100 million a year, and the way they figured out the money was leaving the country is almost too absurd to believe. At one point, the state turned on a basic security feature that tracked the IP addresses logging into the system to bill for child care. The instant they switched it on, they caught it. People logging in from overseas, including from Japan, billing Minnesota taxpayers for childcare supposedly happening in Minneapolis. One investigator compared the missing safeguard to buying a brand new car with no brakes. So they finally had brakes. They could finally see who was looting the system and from where. And then, roughly 2 weeks later, somebody turned the tracking off again. 2 weeks. Now sit with that. Who turns off the one tool that just caught money flying to the other side of the planet? And why? This was a program where centers billed for 100 kids a day that no one ever saw, where owners paid mothers cash kickbacks to enroll children who did not attend, where, according to testimony, some of the fraudsters openly said the scam was easiest and most profitable in Minnesota, that they had first heard about it sitting in a refugee camp in Kenya. The state had become a destination, a reputation, and instead of slamming the door, leadership kept taking the brakes off the car. This is the pattern Swanson watched form in real time. The bigger the theft, the bigger the effort to not see it. And the most disturbing confirmation of just how big it really was would not come from him at all. It would come from somewhere the department never expected. But before we get there, you need to see what they did to the people who refused to stop talking, because looking away was not enough for them. They went after the messengers. This is the part that should make your blood run cold, because this is where it stops being bureaucratic and starts being personal. Scott Stillman was one of the forensic investigators digging into this. He put his concerns in writing, warning that if the public ever understood the gravity of what they were seeing, it would have a negative impact on the department, its leaders, and state government. He was right. So watch what happened to him. Stillman says the state's own Attorney General's office and DHS pressured him into signing a plea agreement stating that he had made false statements. He says it was designed to do one thing: destroy his credibility. He denies to this day that he ever made false statements. They did not refute his evidence. They tried to erase the man, and he was not alone. Faye Bernstein spent 2 decades inside that same department in contract management and compliance. When she tried to raise the alarm, she says she was hit with a smear campaign. She says she was called racist for doing her job. Her responsibilities were stripped away. 20 years of service, and the reward for telling the truth was to be painted as the villain. Now here is where it all comes back to the top. Through this entire scandal, Governor Tim Walz has insisted he was unaware, that he did not know. And Bernstein, a woman who gave 20 years to his administration's department, was asked about that directly. Her answer was 4 words: absolutely false. She said she escalated her concerns to the governor's office so many times she was embarrassed, like a broken record, and that the idea leadership did not know is, in her words, absolutely false. So you have a choice to make about who to believe: the politician who says he had no idea, or the career investigators and the 20-year insider who say they told him over and over and got punished for it. And the people who silenced these investigators were about to receive a verdict from the one office in Minnesota that answers to no party, runs no campaign, and has no reason on earth to take a side. That office is the Minnesota Office of the Legislative Auditor. Not Republicans, not Fox News, not a campaign. The state's own nonpartisan watchdog, whose entire job is to tell the legislature the truth no matter who it embarrasses. And in 2019, they looked at exactly what these investigators had been screaming about. Their finding was quiet, clinical, and devastating. They concluded that the department's controls were insufficient to effectively prevent, detect, and investigate fraud in the Child Care Assistance Program. In plain English, the watchdog confirmed it. The system was wide open, and the people running it had failed to guard it. Now step back and look at the full shape of this. They suppressed the investigators. That is Swanson, ordered to delete the findings. They blindfolded the system. That is the security tracking switched off 2 weeks after it caught money flying to Japan. They punished the messengers. That is Stillman pressured into a false statement plea and Bernstein smeared as a racist. And the man at the very top says he never knew, while his own 20-year employee calls that absolutely false. That is not a series of accidents. That is a single, consistent decision repeated for years. Protect the institution. Bury the truth. And here is what should truly alarm you: they are not done. In April of 2026, the FBI executed search warrants and found more than 20 daycares and autism centers in Minneapolis abusing these same taxpayer programs. Republicans on the House Oversight Committee released a 205-page report concluding senior officials knew about credible systemic fraud as early as 2019 and failed to act, citing fear of being perceived as racist rather than any real legal barrier. And the vice president has now referred the governor and the attorney general to the Department of Justice for a criminal investigation. This is live, right now. But none of it, not the raids, not the report, not the referral, hits as hard as one single number the state paid good money to keep you from ever connecting. So when you put all of this together, there is really only one conclusion left. And it is the exact conclusion they spent $90,000 trying to stop you from reaching. And here it is, the number they buried. Remember, leadership did not just ignore the investigators. At one point, the department spent roughly $90,000 hiring an outside consulting firm to dig into the investigators' claims. Think about the goal there. You hire a firm to prove your own fraud unit is exaggerating to make the problem go away. And that firm came back with its own initial estimate of the fraud: $105 million. $105 million. The state paid to be told the whistleblowers were wrong, and its own hired firm told them the whistleblowers were right, while prosecutors had publicly proven only 5 to 6 million. The number Swanson's team was punished for saying out loud was effectively confirmed by the people sent to debunk them. That is the whole scandal in a single line. They knew. Now look at what you just learned. They silenced the cop. They turned off the brakes. They destroyed the messengers. The watchdog confirmed the system failed, and their own paid consultant confirmed the scale. Every piece points the same direction. You now understand this story better than almost anyone watching the evening news tonight, because you did not just hear that there was fraud. You saw exactly how it was protected and who profited from looking away. So here's the bottom line. When a government works harder to bury the people exposing theft than to stop the theft itself, the fraud is not the failure. The fraud is the policy. Patterns like this do not stop on their own, and neither do we. So subscribe and turn on the bell so the next breakdown hits your feed the moment it drops. And drop a comment below. Tell me the exact moment in this video where it clicked for you, because it all comes back to one man, a trooper who spent his career catching criminals, standing in an office being told to delete the crime. He would not pick up the eraser. The question for Minnesota is why so many people above him reached for it instead.